Marcus had always been a quiet neighbor. He worked long hours as a software engineer and kept to himself in his small townhouse on Maple Street. The neighborhood was peaceful, with well-maintained lawns and friendly waves between residents. That was until Linda moved in next door. Linda wasn't just any neighbor. She was the new HOA president, and she took her role very seriously. Within her first week, she had already sent 3 violation notices to different houses on the street. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, and she carried a clipboard everywhere she went, ready to document any rule infractions. Marcus first noticed something was wrong on a Tuesday morning when he couldn't get his car out of his garage. There, blocking his driveway completely, was Linda's bright red BMW. He stood there for a moment, thinking it must be a mistake. Maybe she was just visiting someone, and would move it soon. He walked over to Linda's house and knocked on the door. She answered wearing a pink bathrobe and holding a coffee mug that read, "Boss Lady." "Excuse me, Linda," Marcus said politely. "Your car is blocking my garage. I need to get to work." Linda looked at him like he had just asked her to give him her firstborn child. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I'm having my driveway redone. The workers need space for their equipment. I'll move it when they're finished." "When will that be?" Marcus asked, checking his watch. He was already running late for an important meeting. "Could be today, could be next week. These contractors, you never know." Linda shrugged. "Can't you just walk to work or take the bus?" Marcus felt his jaw drop. His office was 20 miles away in the city. "Linda, I can't walk 20 miles to work. I really need you to move your car." "Well, I can't move it right now. I'm not even dressed yet," she said, looking him up and down like he was the unreasonable one. "Besides, there's nothing in the HOA rules that says I can't park there temporarily." Marcus had read the HOA rules when he bought his house. He was pretty sure blocking someone's driveway was illegal, period. But Linda had already closed the door in his face. He ended up taking an expensive Uber to work and spent the entire day fuming. When he got home that evening, the BMW was still there. Linda's driveway looked exactly the same as it had that morning. No workers, no equipment, no sign of any construction. The next morning, same thing. Linda's car was still blocking his garage. This time, Marcus called the non-emergency police line. "I'm sorry, sir," the dispatcher said. "We can't tow a vehicle from private property unless it's been there for more than 72 hours, or you're the property owner." "But it's blocking my garage," Marcus protested. "You'll need to work it out with your neighbor or contact a civil attorney." Marcus hung up, frustrated. He knocked on Linda's door again, but this time she didn't even answer, though he could see her peeking through the curtains. By Friday, Marcus had missed 3 days of work and spent over $200 on ride shares. His boss was starting to ask questions, and Marcus was running out of patience. That weekend, he decided to do some research. He pulled out his HOA handbook and read every single rule and regulation. He also looked up local parking laws and property rights. What he discovered made him smile for the first time all week. Linda might be the HOA president, but she had made a crucial mistake. His garage was on his property, and the driveway leading to it was also his. According to both city ordinances and the HOA rules, blocking someone's driveway was not only inconsiderate but actually illegal. But Marcus also discovered something else interesting. The HOA rules stated that any violations should be reported to the board for review. Since Linda was the president, she was technically supposed to report her own violation. Something told him that wasn't going to happen. Marcus spent Sunday afternoon taking photos of Linda's car from every angle, documenting the license plate, the position of the vehicle, and the dates and times. He also printed out the relevant HOA rules and city ordinances. Monday morning came, and the BMW was still there. Marcus had a plan now, but he needed to be smart about it. He knew Linda wasn't the type to admit she was wrong or apologize. In fact, he had a feeling things were about to get much worse before they got better. He knocked on her door one more time. When Linda answered, she was wearing her jogging outfit and had that same dismissive expression. "Your car is still blocking my garage," Marcus said calmly. "And it's going to stay there until my contractors are finished," Linda replied. "I told you there's nothing you can do about it. I checked the rules myself." "Actually," Marcus said, pulling out his printed documents. "I think you might want to read Section 12 of the HOA Guidelines and City Ordinance 4.7.2 about blocking driveways." Linda barely glanced at the papers. "I don't have time for this. I'm the HOA president. I know the rules better than anyone." "So you're saying you're not going to move your car?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. Deal with it." This time, Marcus was the one who walked away. But unlike Linda, he had a plan that was going to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Marcus spent his lunch break that Monday making phone calls. First, he called his cousin Jake, who worked as a locksmith. Then he called his friend Tony, who owned a small moving company. By the end of the day, he had everything arranged. Tuesday morning arrived, and Linda's BMW was still planted firmly in front of his garage. Marcus checked the time on his phone. It had been exactly 1 week since this whole mess started. Perfect. At 8 a.m., Jake arrived in his locksmith van. Marcus had explained the situation to his cousin, who found the whole thing hilarious. "So let me get this straight," Jake said, pulling his tools from the van. "She parks in front of your garage, blocks you in, refuses to move, and thinks there's nothing you can do about it?" "That's about right," Marcus replied. "She keeps saying she's having her driveway worked on, but I haven't seen a single contractor over there." "Well, she's about to learn a valuable lesson about property rights." Jake grinned. The two men got to work. Marcus's garage had a side door that opened directly into his backyard. Over the next hour, Jake installed a heavy-duty deadbolt lock on the main garage door from the inside. It was the kind of lock that could only be opened with a key from the outside. While they worked, Marcus noticed Linda peeking through her window several times. He pretended not to see her and continued with his plan. Once the lock was installed, Marcus drove his car out through the side entrance into his backyard, then around to the front of the house. He parked on the street, making sure not to block anyone's driveway. Unlike some people, he actually followed the rules. The next part of his plan required perfect timing. Marcus had checked Linda's schedule over the past week. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m. she left for her yoga class and didn't return until noon. Like clockwork, he saw her walking to her car at 9:55 a.m. But there was one problem. Her BMW was still blocking his garage. Linda stood next to her car, looking confused. She walked around the vehicle, then over to Marcus's garage door. She tried to lift it, but the new lock held it firmly in place. Marcus watched from his living room window as she knocked on the garage door, as if someone might answer. She tried calling someone on her phone, probably her yoga instructor, to say she'd be late. After 10 minutes of struggling, she finally gave up and went back inside her house. Marcus waited another hour to make sure she wasn't coming back out. Then he made his second phone call of the day. "Tony's moving. This is Tony." "Hey, Tony, it's Marcus. Remember that favor I asked about?" "I'm ready." 20 minutes later, Tony arrived with a small moving truck and 2 helpers. Marcus had hired them for a very specific job. "You sure about this, man?" Tony asked. "I mean, it's legal and all, but she's going to be furious." "She's had a week to move her car," Marcus replied. "I asked nicely multiple times. I even showed her the rules." She chose to ignore them. The plan was simple but brilliant. Since Linda's car was parked on Marcus's property, blocking his garage, and she had refused to move it despite multiple requests, Marcus was well within his rights to have it relocated, but he wasn't going to have it towed. That would be too easy, and Linda would just call the tow company and raise hell. Instead, Marcus had come up with something much more creative. Tony's team got to work. Using professional car dollies and straps, they carefully lifted Linda's BMW and loaded it onto the truck. They were experts at moving vehicles, and the car wasn't damaged in any way. They simply transported it to a new location. That location was the public parking lot of a shopping center about 5 miles away. Marcus had checked with the mall management, and they said cars could park there for up to 24 hours before being towed. He even paid for a parking spot to make sure everything was completely legal. Once the car was safely relocated, Marcus drove his own car back through the side entrance and parked it properly in his garage. For the first time in a week, he could park in his own space. He had Tony's team place a small note under Linda's front door. It simply read, "Your vehicle has been relocated to Westfield Shopping Center, Section B, Space 47. Have a nice day." Marcus then went about his normal Tuesday routine. He worked from home that day, specifically so he could witness Linda's reaction when she discovered her car was missing. At 12:15 p.m., he heard Linda's front door slam. Through his window, he could see her standing in her driveway, looking around frantically. She was wearing her yoga outfit and carrying a water bottle, clearly expecting to find her car where she had left it. She walked over to where her BMW had been parked and stood there for a solid minute, as if the car might suddenly reappear. Then she started looking around the neighborhood, walking up and down the street to see if someone had moved it to a different spot. Marcus watched as Linda's confusion turned to panic, then to anger. She stormed over to his house and began pounding on his front door. "Marcus! Marcus, I know you're in there!" she shouted. "What did you do with my car?" Marcus opened the door calmly. "Oh, hi Linda, how was yoga? Don't play dumb with me. Where is my car?" "I assume it's wherever you parked it," Marcus replied innocently. "It was right there." She pointed to the spot in front of his garage. "Now it's gone." "Did you have it towed?" "Why would I have your car towed from my own property?" Marcus asked. "That seems like something you should have thought about before parking there." Linda's face was turning red. "I'm calling the police. This is theft." "You're welcome to call whoever you'd like," Marcus said. "I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about someone illegally parking on private property for a week." He closed the door and went back to watching through the window. Linda spent the next hour on her phone, presumably calling everyone she could think of. Marcus could hear her yelling even through his closed windows. Around 2 p.m., a police car pulled up. Marcus had been expecting this. He gathered his photos, printed copies of the HOA rules, and the city ordinances he had researched. He was ready. Officer Martinez stepped out of the patrol car and was immediately approached by Linda, who had been waiting on her front lawn. Marcus could hear her animated voice from inside his house as she gestured wildly toward his garage. Marcus opened his front door and walked outside calmly, carrying his folder of documentation. "Officer, thank you for coming," Linda said breathlessly. "This man stole my car. It was parked right there this morning and now it's gone." Officer Martinez looked between Linda and Marcus, then at the empty space in front of the garage. "Sir, do you know anything about a missing vehicle?" "I do," Marcus replied. "But before we get into that, I think you should know that the vehicle in question was illegally parked on my property for 7 days, blocking my garage and preventing me from accessing my own driveway." "That's not true," Linda interrupted. "I was having work done on my driveway. I had every right to park there temporarily." Marcus opened his folder and handed Officer Martinez several photos. These show the dates and times the vehicle was parked there. As you can see, there's been no construction work at her property. I also have documentation showing I asked her multiple times to move the car. Officer Martinez studied the photos carefully. "Ma'am, is this your vehicle?" he asked, showing Linda one of the photos. "Yes, that's my BMW, but—" "And you parked it here, blocking this gentleman's garage?" Linda's confidence began to waver. "I told you I was having work done. It was temporary." "For 7 days?" the officer asked. Marcus pulled out more documents. "Officer, here are the relevant HOA rules and city ordinances regarding blocking driveways. You'll see that this is clearly prohibited." Officer Martinez reviewed the papers. "Sir, where is the vehicle now?" "It's been relocated to a public parking lot where it's legally parked," Marcus answered. "I have the location written down for the owner." "You can't just move someone's car," Linda protested. "Actually, ma'am," Officer Martinez said, "if a vehicle is illegally parked on private property, and the owner refuses to move it after being asked, the property owner does have the right to have it relocated. As long as the vehicle wasn't damaged and was moved to a legal parking space, no crime has been committed." Linda's face went pale. But I'm the HOA president." "I was dealing with a maintenance issue." "That doesn't give you the right to block someone else's driveway," the officer replied. "In fact, you could be cited for illegal parking." Marcus handed Linda a piece of paper. "Here's the address where your car is located. Westfield Shopping Center, Section B, Space 47. Linda snatched the paper from his hand. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to report this to the HOA board." "You are the HOA board president," Marcus reminded her. "So I guess you'll be reporting yourself." Officer Martinez suppressed a smile. "Ma'am, I suggest you retrieve your vehicle and find a legal place to park it while your driveway work is being completed." "Sir, you handled this appropriately. Just make sure you document everything in case there are any future issues." After the officer left, Linda stood in her driveway glaring at Marcus. "This isn't over," she said. "I hope not," Marcus replied. Because next time I might not be so accommodating. Linda called an Uber to take her to the shopping center. Marcus watched her leave, feeling satisfied that justice had been served. But he knew Linda well enough by now to realize she wasn't going to let this go. That evening, Marcus received an email from the HOA board. It was sent to all residents and was titled, "Important Notice Regarding Property Use and Parking Violations." The email, clearly written by Linda, stated that there had been an incident involving the unauthorized relocation of a vehicle, and that such actions would not be tolerated in their community. It went on to warn residents about taking matters into their own hands, instead of following proper HOA procedures. Marcus read the email twice, then began typing his response. He wasn't going to let Linda rewrite history or intimidate other residents. His reply email included all the photos he had taken, copies of the relevant rules and ordinances, and a detailed timeline of events. He sent it to every address on the HOA mailing list with the subject line, "The full story, when HOA presidents break their own rules." Within an hour, Marcus's phone started ringing. The first call was from Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who lived 3 houses down. "Marcus, dear, I had no idea Linda was causing you so much trouble," she said. "That email of hers made it sound like you were some kind of criminal." The second call was from Dave, who lived across the street.
"Dude, I can't believe she blocked your garage for a week."
"I was wondering why I kept seeing you walking around the neighborhood instead of driving." More calls followed throughout the evening. It turned out that several neighbors had their own stories about Linda's behavior since becoming HOA president. Mrs. Chen had been fined for having a small garden gnome that was apparently not in keeping with community standards. The Johnson family had been cited because their teenage son's skateboard was visible in their driveway overnight. By the end of the evening, Marcus realized that Linda had been using her position to bully residents over minor issues while ignoring major violations when they involved her own convenience. The next morning, Marcus found a formal notice taped to his front door. It was an HOA violation citing him for unauthorized modification of property, referring to the lock he had installed on his garage door. Marcus laughed out loud. Linda was actually trying to fine him for installing a lock on his own garage door. He took a photo of the notice and added it to his growing collection of evidence. But Linda wasn't done. Over the next few days, Marcus received 3 more violation notices. One claimed his trash can was 2 inches too far from his house. Another said his lawn was a 1/4 inch too tall. The third cited him for having a non-approved welcome mat. It was clear that Linda was retaliating, and she was being ridiculously petty about it. But Marcus had been documenting everything, and he knew these harassment citations would only hurt her credibility with the other residents. What Linda didn't know was that Marcus had been in contact with several neighbors who were equally fed up with her behavior. A group was forming and they were planning to take action. Marcus was also planning something else. He had 2 weeks of vacation time saved up, and he had been thinking about taking a trip to visit his sister in Colorado. Originally, he had planned to wait until the fall, but recent events had given him a much better idea. If Linda wanted to play games with HOA violations and power trips, Marcus was going to show her what real inconvenience looked like, and this time he was going to make sure she couldn't blame anyone but herself. Marcus spent the weekend carefully planning his next move. He had learned a lot about Linda over the past 2 weeks, and he knew she was predictable in her selfishness. She always chose the most convenient option for herself, regardless of how it affected others. On Monday morning, Marcus called his boss to request 2 weeks of vacation time starting Thursday. Then he called his cousin Jake again. "I need another favor," Marcus said. "Remember that lock you installed on my garage? I need you to install one just like it on the side door, too." "You want to lock yourself out of your own garage?" Jake asked, confused. "Not exactly. I want to lock someone else out of my garage while I'm out of town." Jake arrived Tuesday afternoon with a matching deadbolt. This time, he installed it on the side door that led from the garage to Marcus's backyard. When he was finished, the garage could only be accessed with keys that only Marcus possessed. "I still don't understand what you're planning," Jake said as he packed up his tools. "Let's just say Linda is about to learn that actions have consequences," Marcus replied. Wednesday evening, Marcus loaded his car with luggage and drove it out of the garage through the side entrance. But instead of parking it on the street, he drove to a long-term parking garage downtown. He took an Uber back home, making sure none of his neighbors saw him return. Thursday morning, Marcus woke up early and watched through his window. Like clockwork, Linda emerged from her house at 7:30 a.m. to get her newspaper. She was wearing her bathrobe and slippers, and her hair was in curlers. As she bent down to pick up her newspaper, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. There, parked directly in front of her own driveway, was a large moving truck. Marcus had rented the biggest truck available from the local moving company. It was completely legal to park on the street, and he had made sure it wasn't blocking any fire hydrants or other restricted areas. But it was positioned perfectly to block Linda's driveway, just as her BMW had blocked his garage. Linda stood up slowly, newspaper in hand, staring at the truck. She walked around it, looking for any indication of who it belonged to. The rental company's name was clearly visible on the side, but there was no other identifying information. Marcus watched as Linda marched over to his house and began pounding on his front door. When he didn't answer, she tried looking through his windows. She couldn't see him because he was hiding upstairs, but she could probably tell that the house looked empty. After 20 minutes of trying to get his attention, Linda pulled out her phone and called the rental company. Marcus couldn't hear her conversation, but he could see her gesturing angrily at the truck. Around 9 a.m., a rental company employee arrived in a small van. Marcus watched as Linda spoke with him, pointing at her blocked driveway and then at Marcus's house. The employee walked around the truck, checking its position and consulting something on his clipboard. After a brief conversation, the employee got back in his van and drove away, leaving the truck exactly where it was. Linda stood there for several minutes, apparently in shock that her complaint hadn't resulted in immediate action. Marcus knew why the rental company wouldn't move the truck. He had paid for a 2-week rental and had specifically confirmed that the parking location was legal. The truck wasn't violating any laws, and the rental company had no obligation to move it just because it was inconvenient for someone else. By 10 a.m., Linda was on her phone again, this time calling what Marcus assumed was the police. He had expected this and wasn't worried. The truck was legally parked, and he had all the documentation to prove it. Officer Martinez arrived around 11 a.m., the same policeman who had handled the BMW incident. Marcus could see Linda rushing out to meet him, still in her bathrobe but with her hair now styled and makeup applied. From his upstairs window, Marcus watched Linda point at the truck, then at her driveway, then at his house. Officer Martinez walked around the truck, checking the same things the rental company employee had examined earlier. After about 10 minutes, Marcus saw the officer shake his head and spread his hands in a gesture that clearly meant, "There's nothing I can do." Linda's body language became more agitated, and Marcus could see her arguing with the officer. Officer Martinez spent a few more minutes trying to calm Linda down, then got back in his patrol car and drove away. Linda stood in her driveway looking defeated, but Marcus knew Linda wouldn't give up that easily. Sure enough, around noon, a tow truck arrived. Marcus watched as Linda spoke with the driver, pointing at the truck and clearly trying to convince him to remove it. The tow truck driver spent several minutes examining the situation. He took photos of the truck's position, checked for any signs that it was illegally parked, and even called someone on his radio. After about 20 minutes, he got back in his truck and drove away without taking any action. Marcus smiled. The truck was legally parked on a public street, and no tow company would remove it without proper authorization from the city or police. By this point, Linda had been dealing with the blocked driveway for 5 hours. Marcus decided it was time for the next phase of his plan. He quietly slipped out of his house through the back door and walked 3 blocks to where his friend Tony was waiting with a small car. Tony drove him to the airport where Marcus caught his flight to Colorado. As the plane took off, Marcus received a text message from his neighbor Dave. "Dude, where are you? Linda is going crazy trying to find you. She's been knocking on your door all day." Marcus smiled and turned off his phone. Linda was about to discover what it felt like to have her driveway blocked for 2 weeks straight, with no way to contact the person responsible and no legal recourse to fix the problem. The irony was perfect. Linda had blocked his garage for a week, claiming it was temporary and that he should just deal with it. Now she was going to experience exactly the same situation, except it would last twice as long. Marcus had left detailed instructions with Tony about checking on his house while he was gone. Tony would water his plants and collect his mail, but he had strict orders not to move the truck or give Linda any information about Marcus's whereabouts. As Marcus settled into his seat for the 3-hour flight, he couldn't help but think about Linda discovering that the truck wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. She had taught him that sometimes people only learn when they experience the consequences of their own behavior, and Linda was about to get a master class in consequences. Marcus spent his first few days in Colorado hiking with his sister and enjoying the mountain air. He had deliberately left his phone off most of the time, but when he checked his messages on Saturday evening, he found quite a collection waiting for him. There were 17 missed calls from Linda, 12 voicemails, and 43 text messages. The messages started out demanding and angry, but as the days passed, they became increasingly desperate. "Marcus, this is ridiculous. Move that truck immediately." Thursday, 2 p.m. "I know you're doing this on purpose. This is harassment." Thursday, 6 p.m. "I can't get my car out. I have appointments." Friday, 8 a.m. "Please, I'm sorry about your garage. Can we work this out?" Friday, 3 p.m. "I had to cancel my yoga class again. This has gone too far." Saturday, 10 a.m. Marcus also had messages from several neighbors. Dave had sent updates throughout the week with photos and commentary. Day 2. Linda tried to climb over the truck. It didn't work. Photo of Linda in a dress attempting to squeeze between the truck and a fence. Day 3. She hired 3 different moving companies to try to move it. None of them would touch it. Photo of Linda arguing with a confused-looking mover. Day 4. Linda is now parking on the street 4 blocks away and walking home. She looks miserable. Photo of Linda trudging down the sidewalk carrying grocery bags. Mrs. Peterson had also sent a message. "Dear Marcus, I don't know where you are, but Linda came to my house asking if I knew how to contact you. She seemed very upset. I told her I didn't know anything. I hope you're having a nice vacation." The most interesting message came from Mark Collins, another neighbor Marcus didn't know very well. "Hey man, I heard about what's happening with Linda and the truck. Several of us are planning to call for a special HOA meeting to discuss her behavior as president. Thought you should know." Marcus smiled as he read through the messages. Everything was going exactly as he had hoped. Linda was experiencing the same frustration and inconvenience she had put him through, but multiplied by 2 weeks instead of 1. His sister Sarah, who had been watching him scroll through his phone, shook her head. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" "She had it coming," Marcus replied. Sometimes people need to experience their own medicine before they understand how bitter it tastes. Back in the neighborhood, Linda's situation was getting worse by the day. She had tried every legal avenue she could think of to get the truck moved. She had called the rental company daily, filed complaints with the city, contacted her insurance company, and even consulted with a lawyer. The lawyer had been particularly unhelpful. He explained that since the truck was legally parked and Marcus had paid for the rental, there was nothing she could do except wait for the rental period to expire. When Linda asked about suing Marcus, the lawyer pointed out that he had only done exactly what she had done to him, except he had done it legally from the start. By the second week, Linda's daily routine had become a nightmare. She had to park 4 blocks away because all the closer street parking was taken by other residents. Her grocery trips required multiple walks back and forth to carry bags. She had missed 3 important HOA meetings because she couldn't get her car out in time. The other residents were starting to notice Linda's predicament, and word was spreading about the reason behind it. Mrs. Chen, who Linda had fined for her garden gnome, was particularly unsympathetic. "Now she knows how it feels to be inconvenienced," Mrs. Chen told her neighbor. "Maybe she'll think twice before writing violation notices for every little thing." On Tuesday of the second week, Linda did something desperate. She hired a locksmith to try to break into Marcus's garage, thinking she could move his car and somehow use his driveway to get around the truck. The locksmith, however, refused to open the garage without written permission from the homeowner. When Linda claimed she was the HOA president and had authority, he asked to see the specific HOA rule that gave her access to residents' private garages. Of course, no such rule existed. Frustrated and running out of options, Linda decided to take matters into her own hands. On Wednesday morning, she approached Tony, who was watering Marcus's plants as instructed. "Excuse me?" Linda said, trying to sound friendly. "Are you a friend of Marcus's?" Tony looked up from the flower bed. "Yeah, I'm watching his place while he's out of town. Do you know when he's coming back?" "Nope," Tony replied truthfully. Marcus had told him he might extend his vacation depending on how things were going. "Do you know anything about that truck?" Linda asked, pointing at the vehicle that had been ruining her life for over a week. "What truck?" Tony asked, playing dumb. Linda's friendly facade cracked. "That truck. The one that's been blocking my driveway for 9 days. "Oh, that truck. Yeah, I see it every day. Looks like someone rented it for moving," Tony said casually. "It's not being used for moving. It's just sitting there." Tony shrugged. "Maybe they're taking their time. I've seen people rent trucks for weeks when they're doing big moves." Linda stormed away, and Tony continued watering the plants with a small smile on his face. Thursday marked 10 days since the truck had appeared. Linda had developed a routine of glaring at it every morning while she collected her newspaper, as if her anger might somehow make it disappear. That evening, she received an unexpected visitor. Mark Collins knocked on her door with a clipboard and a serious expression. "Linda, I'm here to inform you that 8 residents have signed a petition calling for a special HOA meeting to discuss your conduct as president," he said formally. Linda's face went white. "My conduct? What about Marcus's conduct? He's the one who legally parked a truck on a public street after you illegally blocked his garage for a week," Mark interrupted. "We've all seen the photos and documentation he shared. We know exactly what happened. I was having work done on my driveway. Where are the contractors, Linda? Where are the permits? Where's any evidence that you were having legitimate work done?" Mark asked. "Because all we've seen is you using your position to bully residents and then retaliating when someone stood up to you." Linda tried to argue, but Mark continued. "The meeting is scheduled for Saturday morning. We'll be discussing your violation of HOA rules, your abuse of power, and whether you should continue as president." As Mark walked away, Linda realized that her 2 weeks of inconvenience were about to become much more than just a blocked driveway. Her entire position of power in the community was now at risk, and it was all because she had been too arrogant to simply move her car when asked politely. Marcus, still enjoying the mountain views in Colorado, had no idea that his simple act of reciprocal justice was about to result in Linda losing her iron grip on the HOA presidency. But he was about to find out, because his vacation was almost over, and it was time to come home to see what lessons Linda had learned. Marcus returned from Colorado on Sunday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after he had left. As his Uber pulled onto Maple Street, he could see the moving truck still parked in front of Linda's driveway, exactly where he had left it. But something else caught his attention. There was a small crowd of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, and they appeared to be having an animated discussion. As Marcus got out of the Uber with his luggage, Dave spotted him and jogged over with a huge grin on his face. "Marcus, dude, you missed the show of the century yesterday," Dave said excitedly. "What happened?" Marcus asked, though he had a pretty good idea it involved Linda. "The HOA meeting happened, and let me tell you, Linda did not have a good time." Mrs. Peterson appeared beside them, looking more energetic than Marcus had seen her in years. "Oh, Marcus, dear, it was absolutely incredible. 8 families showed up with documentation of Linda's behavior. Mark Collins presented everything like a lawyer." Marcus set down his luggage, intrigued. "What kind of documentation?" "Everything," Dave laughed. "Photos of your blocked garage, copies of all those petty violation notices she sent you, records of other residents she's been harassing. Mrs. Chen brought photos of her garden gnome that Linda tried to ban. The Johnsons had documentation of getting fined for their son's skateboard being visible for one night." Mrs. Peterson nodded enthusiastically, and then Mark read the actual HOA rules out loud, showing how Linda had violated them herself by blocking your driveway. He also pointed out that she had been issuing violation notices for things that weren't actually against any rules. "But here's the best part," Dave continued. "When Linda tried to defend herself, she claimed she had every right to park wherever she wanted because she was the HOA president. She actually said that the rules didn't apply to her the same way they applied to everyone else." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "She really said that?" "Word for word," Mrs. Peterson confirmed. That's when things got really interesting. Mark had looked up the HOA bylaws, and it turns out that a president can be removed by a simple majority vote if they abuse their power or fail to follow the community rules. Dave was practically bouncing with excitement. So they took a vote right there on the spot. It wasn't even close, Marcus. 12 votes to remove her, 2 votes to keep her, and one of those 2 votes was Linda voting for herself. So Linda is no longer the HOA president? Marcus asked. Nope. Mark Collins is the interim president now, Mrs. Peterson said, and his first official act was to review all the violation notices Linda had issued in the past month. He threw out about 80% of them, including all the ones she sent to you. Marcus felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him. How did Linda take all this? Not well, Dave laughed. She stormed out of the meeting, shouting that this was all your fault, and that she was going to sue everyone. But here's the thing nobody told her yet. What's that? The truck rental is up tomorrow. She's been blocked for exactly 2 weeks, just like she blocked you. But she doesn't know you're back yet. Marcus smiled. I should probably go return the truck then. Wait, there's more, Mrs. Peterson said. After Linda left the meeting, we all started talking about how miserable she's made life for everyone in the neighborhood. It turns out she was planning to raise the HOA fees by 30% and implement all sorts of new rules about what colors people could paint their houses and what types of plants they could have. Mark found all her notes, Dave added. She was basically planning to turn our neighborhood into some kind of strict homeowner's prison. Thank goodness you stood up to her when you did. As they talked, Marcus noticed Linda's front door open. She emerged wearing a jogging outfit and carrying car keys, apparently planning to make her daily trek to wherever she had been parking her car. When she saw Marcus standing on the sidewalk, she froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Linda's face turned red with anger and she marched over to confront him. You, she said, pointing an accusatory finger at Marcus. This is all your fault. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? Marcus looked at her calmly. I put you through exactly what you put me through, Linda. The only difference is that I did it legally from the start. I lost my position because of you. You lost your position because you abused your power and broke the rules you were supposed to enforce, Marcus replied. I just parked a truck on a public street. Linda looked around at the gathered neighbors, all of whom were watching this confrontation with great interest. She seemed to realize that she had no support from anyone. This isn't over, she said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried 2 weeks earlier. Actually, it is over, Marcus said. The truck rental expires tomorrow and I'll be returning it. You can have your driveway back just like I can have my garage back. Linda opened her mouth to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. She turned and walked away, probably to begin her long walk to wherever she had been parking. The next morning, Marcus called the rental company to arrange the truck's return. Within a few hours, a driver arrived to take it away. Marcus watched from his window as Linda, who had apparently been keeping an eye on the situation, rushed outside as soon as the truck disappeared. She stood in her now unblocked driveway for several minutes, as if she couldn't quite believe her ordeal was finally over. Then she walked 4 blocks to retrieve her car, which took her nearly 30 minutes round trip. Later that day, Marcus received a formal letter from the new HOA board, signed by interim president Mark Collins. It was an official apology for the inappropriate conduct of the previous administration, and a notification that all violation notices issued to him had been rescinded. The letter also included information about new policies designed to prevent future abuse of power, including term limits for board positions and a formal complaint process for residents who felt they were being unfairly targeted. Over the following weeks, life in the neighborhood returned to normal, but with a noticeably different atmosphere. People seemed friendlier and more relaxed without Linda's constant rule enforcement and threat of violation notices. Marcus never had another problem with anyone parking in front of his garage. In fact, he rarely saw Linda at all. She had become much quieter and kept to herself, apparently having learned that her neighbors weren't going to tolerate her bullying behavior anymore. 3 months later, Marcus ran into Linda at the grocery store. She looked at him briefly, then quickly turned and walked down a different aisle. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best victory was simply being left alone to live in peace. The new HOA board, led by Mark Collins, turned out to be much more reasonable and focused on actual community improvement rather than nitpicking violations. They organized neighborhood barbecues, established a small community garden, and generally worked to make Maple Street a more pleasant place to live. Marcus never regretted his decision to teach Linda a lesson about consequences. Sometimes people need to experience exactly what they put others through before they understand how their actions affect other people. Linda had learned that lesson the hard way, and the entire neighborhood was better off because of it. As for Marcus, he installed a small security camera aimed at his driveway, just in case. But he never needed to use it. Word had spread throughout the community about what happened when someone decided to mess with Marcus's parking space, and nobody was eager to repeat Linda's mistake. The garage locks that Jake had installed remained in place, serving as a permanent reminder that Marcus was prepared to protect his property rights. But more importantly, they served as a symbol that sometimes standing up to bullies requires creativity, patience, and the willingness to give them a taste of their own medicine.